Good morning. Welcome to the OK Grognard Show. Today is Sunday, May 3rd, 2020, 9:30 a.m. in Central Time, coming from Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Doing a new thing on Sundays, a rules retrospective. We're going to kind of discuss initiative as it relates to first edition AD&D, which is what I'm running these days, but also beyond that a little bit. So, check if anybody's in the chat here just to see. If there's anybody that has any immediate questions. No, nothing coming up. Okay. I think when we talk about initiative in any game, but particularly in Dungeons and Dragons, it comes down to who goes first, right? It's always about who gets to go first, because there's always the thinking, and rightfully so in most cases, that if you get to go first, chances are you're going to win. You're going to get hurt less often. You're going to inflict more damage. You're going to make sure that whatever conflict is happening, you're going to come out on top. You're less likely to wind up with some sort of downside to an encounter, whether that's being captured or killed or winning the race, losing the race, whatever you want to call it. And it's fairly true. In first edition AD&D, at its simplest and the easiest way to run it is just to have party initiative versus opponent's initiative. Both roll a six-sider. Whoever rolls high wins the contest. And I will read from the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, where initiative is detailed, where it's delineated exactly what it means. In any time there's an encounter, you first have to determine if there's surprise, because surprise gives initiative to the non or less surprised party. So there are varying degrees of it. But it is otherwise determined when an encounter occurs, and at the start of each combat round, it indicates which of the two parties will act or react. Again, a d6 is rolled, and the scores for the two parties are compared. It is recommended that such initiative rolls be made openly, unless there is some reason to hide that of the encountered monster party, such as special bonuses, which would be unknown to the player characters involved. Now, I will say at this juncture that that can be a little bit problematic, because if you're only rolling initiative secretly when there is the possibility of some special factor affecting that initiative, then anytime you roll it secretly, it's got to be assumed that there's some special factor involved here. So maybe that doesn't work perfectly, but is it more fun for the group that you're playing with to see the rolls out in front of them, to know that this is a fair and square sort of combat? Now, a lot of people will say, if your players think you're cheating, then you've got other problems, and I agree with that. But There's something to having dice rolls in the open that make them fun and exciting. The higher of the two rolls is said to possess the initiative for the melee round. While it is not accurate to roll one die for all individuals comprising each party, it is a convenient and necessary expedient. Separate rolls could be made for each member of two small groups, for instance. But what happens to this simple, brief determination if one party consists of 9 characters and 6 henchmen, and the other of 7 giants and 19 direwolves, let us say? Possession of initiative allows the individuals to take action or reaction as desired according to the foregoing list of alternatives and as detailed hereafter. The dexterity or speed of individuals or weapons is not considered in the 1 minute melee round, except as hereafter noted. And that will come into effect when there are cross purposes involved. I won't read further from later in the combat encounter rules, but I will mention here that that has to do with is a weapon fast enough to, for instance, thwart a slower weapon and finish an opponent off before they have a chance to swing with it. Let's say somebody's using a big old clunky two-handed sword and someone else is using a dagger, but the person with the two-handed sword later in the combat is down to like 1 hit point, and if they get to swing and they get to roll their damage at the same time as someone else who's, let's say, swinging with a dagger, then and their speed factors in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons would have a dagger at 2, I think, and two-handed sword at 10. So there's more than a factor of 6 between them, which means the dagger should always be going ahead of the two-handed sword. So too when it comes down to spells being cast. A fireball, for instance, which I think has a 3-segment casting time. Well, that would be its speed in addition to what is rolled. So if I roll a 6, take 3 away, I would effectively have a 3. Somebody with a dagger rolls a 6, take 2 away, then they're down to only 4. They would go first. They can hit before the spell goes off, potentially disrupting the spell. All of that stuff plays into the importance of adjudicating combat encounters in such a way that it can figure that stuff in without necessarily having to do the math every single time. Sometimes you can just ballpark it. Most of the time I do. Initiative for creatures with multiple attack routines. When one or more creature involved in a combat are permitted to use their attack routines twice or more during the round, then the following initiative determinants are employed. When the attack routine may be used twice, then allow the side with this advantage to attack first and last with those member of its group who have this advantage. So we're not even rolling at that point. You get 2 attack routines, then you get to take one of them first and one of them last in initiative order. An attack routine, let's say for a creature, might include a claw bite. An attack routine for a higher level fighter, maybe using 2 weapons, could include a sword and dagger being one attack routine. Higher level fighter who gets an additional routine every other round. On that every other round, would go first and last, but would still be involved in regular initiative in the round where they only have the one routine. This is further complicated by haste spells and slow spells. I won't get into the details of those right here, but those can change how often those routines occur, and indeed how often in any number of rounds that you'll be attacking. You may get more attacks per round, you may get attacks every other round in some situations, in which case you may only be rolling for initiative in rounds where you get attacks. So, it does mention also ties. It will often occur that initiative determination results in a tie. Let's face it, on two six-sided dice, the number of times that they'll come up as a tie is fairly often. This merely indicates that each party has an equal chance of acting and that attacks occur simultaneously. In cases of equal initiative score, damage accrues to both groups regardless of what is inflicted. So, in the case of a tie, let's say two fighters on either side, both roll the same initiative, both have the same weapons, both have the same speed factors attached to those weapons, and let's say they both swing and attack and hit, then even if one of them is killed, the other one is still taking the damage from the opponent's attack. So, that's first edition AD&D initiative in a nutshell.